everybody, it is Monday, February 18th, so reading. I am about halfway through Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty. This is the sequel to The City of Brass, and it is really good. I'm just going to say right now, it's kind of a slow burn. Like, this whole series so far is kind of a slow burn, but it spends a lot of time on characters and really, like, deep, realistic characters, and it also spends a lot of time on world building. It does that kind of like flowery, like I'm gonna set the scene for an hour and tell you how all of the decorations look and exactly what people are dressed in, but I actually don't mind it in this one because I feel like it keeps me grounded in the fact that this is a Middle Eastern inspired fantasy, and so I'm not just like applying random stuff. Those were my tortillas popping out of the toaster. But it helps me kind of envision the world and keep everything like straight in my head when I'm going through these books. Also, Ali is amazing. He is so endearing to me. I love his character. Like, all of the characters are super like deep and conflicted and really realistic and well-rounded, and I really like that they're not like one-dimensional cutouts. Like, even ones that from the first book I felt like were a little about, this time around we're getting a little bit more of them. And I'm going to continue to do hand motions like this. And yeah, I'm really enjoying the character development. By the way, if you have never toasted flour tortillas and made like chips, like hot chips to have with hummus or salsa or whatever you want to have them with, you are missing out, because my life was changed when I realized that I could do it this way, and they're so yummy. I also continued my graphic novel kick from the end of last week, and I read 3 more, well, two and some change. Let's be real. I read the first volume of Monstrous, which this one, I believe it's an Asian-inspired fantasy world set in like the 1900s, and it's a monarchy, and there are humans, and then there are like the old gods, and then there's like a cat race and a bunch of other stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on, and the art style of this is captivating. The world is mesmerizing, because the way that the old gods kind of work is they're kind of like ghosts that exist in the world but don't really like inhabit or manipulate anything in the world anymore. They're just kind of there as shadows of themselves, but they're like colossi. So there's these huge things that just roam the world that don't really do anything, and people are just used to it at this point because that's what their world is. And it's gorgeous, because they'll just be casually walking through the woods and there'll be this giant thing in the background, and I'm just like, but what is that thing? What's going on with that thing? Like, I don't think it's going to be a story that I have a huge investment of the characters. Like, the characters are not people that I feel like I'm going to get attached to. But the world itself is just, it's weird, man. I also read Volume 9 of Saga, and that is definitely like the epitome of a series where I don't care at all about the characters. Like, I'm not emotionally invested in any of the characters, but the world is just so bizarre, and there's such weird stuff going on all the time that I keep finding myself coming back to it every now and again and trying to catch up. So I'm just now getting back into it, and I read Volume 9. It has a pretty dramatic ending, to say the least. So I'm interested to continue with that series. That is a kind of like a Romeo and Juliet in space. There's these two warring planets, and soldiers from either side fall in love, and then they have a child, and then it's all like the child's like memoirs. So she is recounting the tales of her family being on the run and trying to like just survive when both of these planets like want to find them and get rid of them, because they don't want them to become any kind of symbol for any kind of unification between the planets, because the war needs to continue on. It is super adult. Like, it's super graphic, both in violence and sexual content, and it's borderline obscene at times, but it's also like really over the top and funny and just bizarre, and you never really know what that series is going to do next. It just kind of, I feel like they just put a bunch of stuff on the wall and throw darts, and they're like, that's the next story arc. And then finally, I just started the second volume of Super Sons, and it's still delightful. I love it so much. Super Sons, of course, is the shenanigans of Damian Wayne and Jonathan Kent as Superboy and Robin, reverse those. And yeah, they're just so great. They're like my favorite duo ever. I think that catches you up. I'm really thinking. I've got like 5 books that I want to try to read this week because I'm insane. I don't think I'm going to get through all of them. I definitely have like a pretty substantial TBR before the end of February, and I don't know if it's achievable. It'll depend on what work does, because work's been stupid lately. Peekaboo. So if I'd been filming for like the past 5-10 minutes or so, you would have just experienced a lot of like screaming and weird noises of despair and grief, because I just finished the Kingdom of Copper and I need that 3rd book. Hey everybody, it is Tuesday, and oh my god, that book was so good. I haven't been this invested in so long. Like, every single character I'm invested in. They're so layered and so interesting, and I can't wait to see how she continues to expand on that in the 3rd book. Like, I've already got like some ideas for like some perspectives that she could add that I really, really hope that she does for the 3rd book, because she added a perspective in the 2nd book that wasn't in the 1st book, and that added a whole nother layer to it. But like the 3rd book, I want like everybody, because I want to get in everybody's heads, because they're just so interesting, and I'm so fascinated by what this book did. Like, there's no way for me to say anything other than it's great and you should go and read these books, because everything I'm feeling right now, everything like that I want to like rant and vent, and all of the other like just crying and emotional like unloading, I can't do, because it all has to do with like very, very spoilery stuff that happened at the end of that book. But oh my god, that book is so good. This trilogy is so good. And I don't know what to do with myself, because I don't have the final book and it's not out yet. Like, I mean, the 2nd book just came out, so it's gonna be a year at least. Probably longer. And I want it. I want it now. I'm so happy. I like, more than any other book, not only is she going in the direction that I want her to go in, like doing the things that I really want her to do, but she's upping it. So like, she's surprising me immensely. It ended the way that I wanted it to end. Like, not exactly, but like the setting. Like, I had an idea of where a few of the characters were going to be at the end of the book, and I was like, this is going to happen. I'm gonna will this to happen. And boy, did it happen. I'm so proud of myself. Just pat on the back. Like, I'm just, oh god. I don't know. I can't talk about it. I can't say anything. I can't talk. I don't know. I'll just sit here for like 5 minutes and make a whole bunch of like frustrated, sad, gleeful noises, because that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I'm so upset that I can't continue with the series, but I'm so happy with what the series is doing, and I'm just... Anyway, I need to pull it together. I need to like, deep breaths, deep breaths. Okay, I do have another book to talk about. I started Scythe by Neil Shusterman. This is a utopian novel in which medicine has advanced to the point where people no longer die. There is nothing that cannot be cured or reversed with the medicine that exists in this society. But there's still a finite amount of resources, and so overpopulation is still a threat, and thus people have to be removed. And so scythes exist, and scythes are chosen as just the people who decide who is eliminated. and there's a lot of like interesting ways that I could see this going. So I think this follows two different perspectives of like scythes who are in training. So a couple of interesting things that have already happened in this book. I'm 30 pages in. There's a boy who's kind of like a thrill seeker and will literally like throw himself off of buildings, just because he knows that medicine can cure him. Like they can put him in like a recovery chamber, I guess, and after so many days he wakes up and he's 100% healed. That's the level of medicine that you're dealing with in this book. There's also the Thunderhead, which is kind of like the cloud that we have today, and it contains all knowledge, like everything. There's no knowledge left to be discovered, and that's intriguing to me because that's the name of the second book. So, you bet your bottom I paid attention to that. I almost said something else besides bottom. So, I think the part of this that's most intriguing to me is not necessarily the scythe side of thing, it's the can't die side of thing. Like, I'm really interested in the way that this world functions. How does that mess with your morality and your relationships? I'm really hoping that that is explored in these. So far, I am intrigued by what's going on. I want to see what's happening, but I'm barely in this one. Hey everybody, it is Wednesday, February 20th, and I have been running a low-grade fever since last night, so not super energetic, but on the flip side, I have been able to just kind of lay in bed today and try to get well and read quite a bit, so I have several things to update you guys on. So I finished volumes 2 and 3 of Super Sons, and we're getting a lot more Teen Titans now, which is great. I really like all of the nostalgia I'm feeling. Also, made it a little further into Scythe. I think I'm like page 120-ish. Yeah, so far it is giving me like teases of what I want. It's giving me bits and pieces of the world building and like the comparison to the world before the advancement to where natural death was no longer a thing, and the world as it is now. And it's a lot of like speculative things, like there's journal entries in between each chapter because every scythe is required to keep a journal every day, and so they're like in between the chapters. It's like I like the idea of the fact that when you take out death and when you like achieve equality on the level that they've achieved it, like there's some variance, but it's like intentional variance, because I'm all over the place with this, but the Thunderhead is more than just a database, it's also like a consciousness, and it regulates everything. So there's no government because the Thunderhead takes care of everything. There's no religion because they've kind of like nixed the need for that in a lot of respects. There's still like some more like cult-like religions. I mean, I guess you could argue that any religion's cult-like, but it is really interesting to see how mundane the world is that they live in, and how people are just kind of going through the motions. Like it's just a world that's all about passing time, which I think is fascinating, and I would love more exploration of that kind of stuff. I'm getting little teases of it here and there though, and I'm appreciating those when I get them. What I'm not appreciating as much is the little teases that I'm getting to a romance between the two main characters, which I'm not surprised. I think I've actually known this going into it because I think other people have complained about this. But, you know, it's a young adult novel, and there's an attractive boy and an attractive girl, and they're competing with each other, so sexual tension's gonna be a thing there. And now there's all of this, like, budding romance going on between them, and I don't feel like it's needed in this story. I don't feel like it's necessary, and hopefully it doesn't take over too much. Like, I don't mind it if it's just kind of an element within it, but my problem with a lot of romances, especially YA romances, I feel like are guilty of this, is that they tend to take over the story and then everything else is overshadowed by this romance, and I'm just like, but what about this other stuff going on? That stuff's important too. Okay, and then finally, I started Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James, and I realize that I have been running a fever, but I was listening to the audiobook while lying in bed earlier, and I felt like I was in a fever dream. This book is weird and incredibly hard to explain, to the point where I actually had to like stop listening to the audiobook and go online and do more research because I was struggling to the point where I wasn't sure if I was just missing things, but I've read a couple of different reviews and watched a couple of videos that say no, it's just really hard to follow, but intentionally so. Like it's so this book pulls a lot from African history and mythology and folklore, and combines this all into this fantasy story that is not super plot focused, and it's very like non-linear, and you've got aspects of unreliable narrator, and I mean there's just a lot of stuff that makes it very confusing to follow. And all of this is done with absolute intention. Because when I researched it, what I'm guessing, again, still don't know a huge amount about this book, but what I'm guessing is going to be the case is I read that this is the first of a trilogy, but it's actually going to be one of those cases where it's the same story over and over again, but from different perspectives. And with all of the different books together, you're supposed to be able to kind of like piece stuff together and kind of come up with your own truth within that trilogy. And I don't think that there's ever going to be like a definitive, like, this is the canon version of this story. I think it's all really meant to be super ambiguous and really hard to follow, to like encourage discussion. But yeah, I've talked a lot about this book and not really explained anything about it because I feel like it's kind of it's it's hard to explain. But I guess if there's a plot that I'm going to give you, it is a book about a group of kind of weird misfit characters banding together to go and find this missing boy. And that is the plot. As far as I can tell from everything that I've read, it's not what I would call a plot heavy book. It is, however, a book that does a lot of exploration. So, first of all, the writing style is gorgeous. And it's beautiful to read. There's so many, like, quotes and little passages that as I'm listening to it, if I had a physical copy and a highlighter, I would be going to town. Because there's really, like, a lot of amazing passages and moments within the story. But because it's such a convoluted mess when you're reading through it, it it's kind of a struggle to figure out anything that makes sense as far as motivations of even like a timeline that fully makes sense. I mean, it's so all over the place. But it also does a lot of really cool explorations of gender roles and sexuality and like man's place in nature. There's a lot of interesting things going on in this book. I'm just confused. I will say, like, the emotions that it's invoking in me are very similar to the emotions that I felt with The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, which is one of my favorite books of all time. I love that book. But that book has a plot. Like, that book has character motivations that span through, that make sense, and it has a like a beginning, middle, and end story arc that tracks. This not so much. Also, this book is like over 600 pages. It really does read like a myth, and has a lot of the same tones and weirdness and kind of awkward like jumps and character motivations and all the things that I've kind of learned when reading mythology. Like, mythology's weird, and this is equally so. Like, this is a weird book with a lot of things that don't really track or don't really make sense. I'm about a third of the way through it, so I'm about halfway through what a lot of people are calling the slog. And I'm finding a lot of stuff in there that I like. Like, again, it's really beautifully written. And it is really fascinating, the kind of stuff that it's exploring and the world that it's creating. I feel like this is a book that's not gonna be for everybody. It's truly one of those that's gonna be super divisive, I think. Critically speaking, the book is very well crafted. I mean, I 100% believe that everything in it is intentional and all of this stuff was a choice. That I have to respect. I have to respect that this is a completely different and unique thing for me to try to sit down and read, and it's making it hard for me to even like talk about it. I mean, obviously not, because I've been talking about it for over 10 minutes now, and I'm really kind of keen to see how this progresses, and especially what it's going to be like when you get those different perspectives in the other books, and like if it feels like it fills in some gaps, if it feels like if you really take your time and read all these books together, can you craft a story that really feels like a cohesive whole? Because I think that that would be incredible. But I also still am not convinced that that's his intent either. Like, I still think that really it's going to be a situation where you have three incredibly unreliable narrators, and it's your job as the reader to decipher what you think is the truth, what you think is the timeline, the narrative, however you want to approach it, but what you want to pull from it. But ultimately, it's not about any of that, because it's all about these really specific explorative themes about all of these different things that make up what it is to be human, what it is to be part of this world. It's just, it's a fever dream. I just turned on my camera, and I had no idea I had this amazing hairstyle going on. Oh, I've ruined it now. This is why I'm not allowed to have nice things. Hey everybody, it is Friday, February 22nd. Yeah, look at that. I only had to think for half a second that time. And I'm feeling a lot better. I was still kind of yesterday. Mostly I was just like super anxious. And I'm not sure what happened, if I just had like a bad reaction to my coffee. But I was like spazzy. And so I've been really like unfocused when it comes to reading and jumping all over the place. And so I have 4 books to talk about, 2 of which I've already talked about, and they're the 2 that I'm still not finished with. But we're going to have to rapid fire through all of this because I imported my footage that I've already filmed this week, and I've filmed more than I thought I had. So, in my spazzy, anxiety-ridden state yesterday, I was struggling to focus in on Black Leopard, Red Wolf, which is the current audiobook that I've been listening to, and so I switched over to The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, and this is a children's classic, and I had not read it yet. But I just needed something a little bit lighter and a little easier for my brain to comprehend. This is about a little girl named Mary, who is just the worst. But she is being raised by her parents in India, but then her parents go off and die from cholera, so that sucks. And so she is shipped off to live at her uncle's manor, like big crazy house with a million rooms, half of which are locked, that kind of estate. And he's also the worst and is never at home. And she's kind of left to her own devices by the people that keep the house. They're just like, hey, go play in the garden. We don't want to mess with you. And yeah, so she does, and she learns a lot, and then there's a lot of positive energy, and she meets friends, and that positive energy spreads, and there's a lot of like rejuvenation and the idea of what you feed into the world gives back kind of concepts in this book. Overall, I thought this book was really cute. I can see why a lot of people love it. Like, a lot of people, this means the world to them, and I can see that. But it really was kind of like the cute, heartwarming story that I needed at the time. And yeah, occasionally I just randomly pick books that work out really well for me. Last night I also picked up Persepolis, and this is by, I'm gonna butcher this every time I try to pronounce it. Not only do I do a terrible job, but also my lisp like kicks in the overdrive. But I believe it's Marjan Satrapi. But she grew up in Iran during the Islamic Revolution and the war with Iraq and all of this really awful stuff. And it's very much in the same vein as Art Spiegelman's Mouse, which is it's a graphic memoir of this like really terrible time. And yeah, she does it a little bit more lighthearted than I remember Mouse being. Mouse, it's been a while, but I remember Mouse being like very heavy. And this is absolutely heavy, but there's a lot of like kind of funny and whimsical stories in here as well. The way that this book is presented is like there's a lot of like little mini stories throughout, and it's just her life from like age 6 to 14. I do really enjoy this format. Like I really like the graphic memoirs. This is one that I feel like the more I think about, I realize just how heavy it is. Like in the moment when you're reading it, you're kind of just going through the story, and there's a lot of like funny stories and things like that. But she also does a lot of subtle like juxtaposition between her life and like other people around her, because she was fortunate enough to not have to deal with some of the things that came out of this situation. But she knew people that did, and she did a lot of situational stuff where she would show panels of kids dying in war versus her dancing at a party. And yeah, that kind of stuff, when you're reading through it, it hits, but the more I think about it afterwards, the more I'm just like, dang, that's awful. So yeah, I recommend this book. It's awful. Okay, finally, the two books that I was already in the middle of and still haven't finished. I'm really close to the end of both of these books. I am like 3/4 of the way through Scythe at this point. So far, I'm continuing to really like it a lot. They're giving me world building, not as much as I would like, but it at least is like done in a really well paced way. Like it's like little nuggets every now and again, and it's nice. It's not like a big old 1984 info dump. The romance aspect hasn't really been a huge issue. In fact, it's served to advance the plot, which I appreciate. I still feel like it's a little bit insta-love for me, which is unfortunate. I really want an earned love. If you're gonna have a romance, make me feel like it's earned. But it has served as a way to advance the story, so it's not like it's just arbitrarily in there, and it definitely hasn't overshadowed other aspects of the story. And like a major aspect that I'm really liking is like the political intrigue stuff that's happening within the Scythedom, which is, now that I think about it, like really hard to say out loud. You'd think they would have come up with a better name for that. But that's, I mean, that's what it's called. That is the hierarchy of the Scythes. And yeah, we've been through 2 like mass meetings. I can't remember what they call them, but basically they all get together 3 times a year and do all of their bookkeeping. You know, decide what laws that they need to adjust, or what things that they need to establish as rules for themselves. And yeah, I'm really enjoying like that kind of stuff. And it's been like very twisty turny, which I like. I like a lot of the different perspectives. I also like the themes of like aggression versus compassion. I guess that's how I'm going to explain it. But there's a lot of like different aspects of how to approach being a Scythe, like as a Scythe whose job is to kill people, are you going to be an aggressive Scythe or are you going to be a compassionate Scythe? And there's a lot of stuff that's explored about that. And it's really, yeah, it's really interesting. Like, there's a lot of good stuff going on in this book. So the elephant in the room, or the black leopard and red wolf in the room. This book, I don't know. I'm so close to the end, and I'm still like, I feel like I need to just let it simmer for like a month or so, and then pick up the physical read and read through it with a very specific mindset. Because here's the thing, I can't, in good faith, tell someone to read this as a fantasy recommendation. What I can say is I would recommend this to someone who's really into mythology and would like a very long, epic first-person perspective through a lot of the crazy random weirdness that happens in mythology. Because that's what that book is. Black Leopard, Red Wolf has been an experience, to say the least. But it's like all of the crazy aspects of folklore and mythology and all the stuff that just doesn't make sense, and like the main character is so out of sorts, like he has no idea half the time what's going on, like he doesn't know what's happened, he doesn't know what's real versus what's not, he doesn't know what he's dreamt and what's actually like memories, he's just so out of sorts on everything, like his understanding of things going on around him is so like chaotic. But when you like read it with the mindset of, but this is the crazy random weird stuff that happens in mythology, you're just like, oh, well no, that makes perfect sense. I don't know. I want to go through it again with that mindset though. Like I want to go through and really experience it as a completely different book. Because when I started, I was just thinking, oh, it's a new fantasy book that's getting buzz. I'll just start it without really having any understanding of what this book is. And that was a mistake. I also think like trying to listen through it on audiobook was a mistake. Not that the audiobook's bad. The narrator's fantastic. He's one of the best, like everything that's in this book, because there's a lot of different emotional things going on in this book. It's all over the place. He does a fantastic job with it. But it's just a lot of to absorb, and I'm listening to it at double speed, and I'm already kind of like having trouble focusing just in general because of the way my brain's been the past couple of days. And so like I don't feel like I'm getting the story as fully as I should be because I'm just kind of rushing through it, but at the same time I feel like that's what I need to do for this first read. Like I need to just kind of like speed through, like just go be along for the ride, just roll with it because it's just so much that you just kind of have to accept that your first time through you're gonna be like, what? It really is insanely beautifully written, and it's so unique that I can't help but like feel like I need to throw some respect its way, but at the same time it's one of those works that I feel like if you don't go into it understanding what you're getting into, it's gonna leave a bad taste in your mouth. And I feel like that's probably gonna happen with a lot of people. It's getting a lot of buzz, and I think a lot of people are gonna go into it expecting something completely different than what they're getting. In case you're wondering, you're not getting African Game of Thrones. Which is an inside joke because apparently the author made that comment in jest at one point. It's like, oh, it's like African Game of Thrones. And it's not. It's really not. But it is to that scope. Like, it is, like, crazy big and expansive. And it's just, it's confusing when you go into it and you don't understand what type of story it is. Okay, so we have some things to talk about. It is Saturday morning. Um, just to get it really quick out of the way, last night I finished Scythe. I like the way it ended. I'm looking forward to continuing that series. I think it's good. Alright, done with that. Let's talk about Black Leopard, Red Wolf. Because I have so many thoughts, but I don't feel like any of them are coherent at all. So what I did for this read through, and what I kind of expressed earlier, but not as eloquently as I hope I'm about to express now, is that I listened through the audiobook, going through it purely for entertainment purposes. This is definitely a literary fantasy. There are so many themes and so many issues that are addressed within this book, that it would be impossible for me to like just grasp everything my first time through. And so once I kind of like got a better understanding of what this book was, I was just like, screw it, I'm just gonna continue as I have been and just kind of like go through it and experience what it is at face value. And what it is at face value is a really hard book to get through. There's a lot of very visceral reactions that I had during this book. It has a lot of torture and bodily harm and rape, to the point where I had, like, at times similar reactions to the reactions that I had when I read through Lolita. But that being said, right now I don't really know how I feel about it, and I don't really know what I can say about it to like convey my feelings. Like, I can't really talk to you guys about this book because I'm still all out of sorts in my own like mindset of what I think this book is or could be, or what it will, like, you know, impart on the world as a whole. So what I've done is I've kind of done some snooping around, and I found a couple of reviews that I think approach this book in a couple of different ways, and I'm going to link those. One is by beautifully bookish Bethany, and she does like a really in-depth yet still non-spoiler just review of really everything in this book. And she does a really great job of breaking it down, of really letting you know what you're getting into, because I think that that's super important, because I did not fully know what I was getting into, and it hindered me in a lot of ways. She does a really careful and deliberate breakdown of everything, or as much as she can. There's so much in this book, and she even says, like, I can't cover everything that's in this book. And so I've left that one because I think that that's a really good review for you to watch if you're curious about this, but you feel like you need more information, because I feel like I haven't done a great job explaining what this book is. I feel like I've just rambled about this book in a bunch of random clips this week. The second review is by Daniel Greene, who does a lot of like fantasy focused book reviews, and he talks a little bit more about what it does for the fantasy genre and how it is so different than what is currently like the most popular of the fantasy books, and how it really engaged him on a level that he didn't expect. But like I've said again and again in this vlog, this is a weird, hard, convoluted mess of a book. But at the same time, every aspect of it feels so intentional. Everything that's in there, I feel like, has purpose. It's a book that I'm so excited to reread. It's a book that I am like highly anticipating sitting down and reading through again. The last book that ever did this to me was The Ocean at the End of the Lane, which I reread immediately because it's much shorter. But this one, when I finally get around to the reread, I'm gonna take as long as I need to. If it takes me a month to read through it, I'll take the month. If it takes me 6 months to read through it, I'll take the 6 months. It is something that I want to like pick apart so completely that I'm just gonna take all the time I need to really kind of get squared away on my feelings, because right now my feelings are so mixed. Anyway, at this point I probably have like 40 minutes of footage of me talking about this book, and I read other books this week, so this vlog needs to stop. We need to quit this vlog. We need to just wrap it up, and yeah, we're gonna do that because I gotta edit this thing.